Welcome back, everyone.
Hello, hello.
It's nice to see you.
Here we are with a special guest yet again, back for an encore. We have Sam Walker from the Outer Banks, Sam Walker, obxnews.com. Sam, we have you on when things are going badly, and it seems like today things are going badly in the Outer Banks. Can you let our folks in the Piedmont know what's been going on out there? Because it seems like it might have caught some folks by surprise.
Yeah, I think it did catch some folks by surprise, and you know, sometimes this happens with these unnamed systems that we get, that if it doesn't get a name, it doesn't seem to get the hype outside those of us who really watch these things closely. But this is kind of typical fall and winter type weather for the Outer Banks when we get these coastal lows that develop, and we got one. It started honking last night with the wind and the rain, and the waves kicked up, and they really kicked up. And unfortunately, the waves kicked up in a big way on Hatteras Island, as they have been doing really since about the 1st of August, and really started getting heightened by Aaron back in late August. And we've had more house collapses. We've had a total of 5 so far today in Buxton, in the area just north of the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. These were all houses that were unoccupied. Had been for some time, although the latest house, the last one that collapsed about 2 hours ago, actually, they had renters in there right up until the evacuation order was issued for Hurricane Aaron back in August. That shows you how dynamic the situation has been there in Hatteras, in Buxton alone. And of course, Highway 12 is covered in sand and water again in the usual spots, and some spots we haven't seen in a while. Up on the north end, that's Pea Island. You see that on the screen right now. That's the Pea Island area, the canal zone as it's called, which shows, you know, they've gotten a lot of sand back up there, but unfortunately not enough in time for sunset tonight, and they're not going to reopen it tonight. So Highway 12 is closed south of Oregon Inlet down to Rodanthe. You can see there in those images we've got as well of some of the sand and water that has been covering the road pretty much off and on all day. Since about 9 o'clock this morning is when we started seeing the overwash, and it's just lasted right on through high tide around noon and into the afternoon and evening hours. You go down farther south into the village of Avon. That's somewhere we haven't seen overwash in almost 3 years, in fact. There was a beach nourishment project there in 2022 that had helped widen the beach and helped absorb a lot of this wave energy, helped build up some dunes, and unfortunately that has caused problems there. We've got some water that's covering Highway 12 in the Kennekeet Shores area, and then of course we go down to Buxton where we talked about the house collapses. There was some overwash there, in fact enough overwash going into the village of Buxton that has pretty much caused them to have to shut the road down so they could move that water and sand out of there. But it has reopened. But you can't get on Hatteras, you can't get on Ocracoke right now because the ferries haven't been running. They pretty much haven't been running since last night because of the strong winds that came out of this low pressure system. And we got another one to deal with coming up Wednesday night and Thursday. Got a brief lull, but it's going to be a rough couple of days. But again, this is kind of typical for this time of year. Fall and winter, we see these lows develop offshore. They blow up out there off the Gulf Stream and cause all kinds of problems out here on the coast.
Well, and Sam, we know that we've seen a lot of storms so far this year. It seems like we've had the same conversation with you multiple times. Do you feel, especially like a place like Avon, you said hadn't really been impacted by the overwash in 3 years. Do you feel like it's getting worse? Is this year abnormal? Like, kind of how does that impact you guys too?
You know, it has been a little abnormal considering what we've had the last couple of years. I think we've kind of gotten lucky, in fact, where we haven't had these nor'easters. We haven't had these coastal lows on a frequent basis. We have them, but not this rapid fire where it's almost like every other week. We had a beautiful week last week, right between the last one that we got the week before that spread it on up the coast towards New England. You know, so, but really since the 1st of August, we've been in kind of this onshore flow where we've had, you know, surf of 4 to 7 feet at times, just on an average beautiful day. It's still been kind of rough on the ocean front. That has just helped chew away some of the sand. And then, of course, the nor'easters that have been sending the 10 and 12-foot waves. And Aaron, you go back to it back in late August when we were talking 15 and 20-foot when we had the real, you know, the 6 houses fell in one day right in this area. And that's that latest house I was talking about a moment ago, the one that's floating around right there now. That house had people in it. this third week of August. That's how fast the situation has happened there in Buxton. But yeah, it has been unusual, and it hasn't been. It's been unusual because it's been a few years since we've seen this where we've had repeated nor'easters. But again, it's very typical out here. You know, we're coming up on the anniversary of 1991, the Halloween storm. Some people call it the perfect storm. That thing wiped out over 24 houses and 2 hotels all along the Outer Banks. And, of course, did what it did all up and down the East Coast. So, you know, it's not unusual that these unnamed storms kind of become hurricane-ish when some of the things they put out.
And Sam, we always appreciate your perspective on this sort of thing. And I think just kind of the last question, one of the things that's really mind-boggling for us that don't live there, and we talked about this a few weeks ago when the last one came through, the big nor'easter, is just the fact that you just mentioned with that last home, a lot of these homes were rented this summer. A lot of us think that these have been abandoned for years or something. So there is kind of a rapid changing element rather than a long, slow progression. Is that something that people need to understand, is that this is actually changing pretty quickly?
Yeah, and it's difficult for people to understand because, you know, we're in the social media era, and, you know, 20 years ago, people didn't see the beach on a regular basis unless they drove down here. You know, it wasn't something where you saw it every day looking on a webcam. This beach has rapidly changed over the last decade and a half, where there was an 8 to 12 foot protective dune that was built by hand back in the 1920s and then grew as time went on to protect it. There was 300 feet of beach. There's some spots it was up to 200 yards of beach in some of these places between the houses, the front row houses, the ones that have fallen over the last couple of weeks. That house we showed you just a moment ago, that house actually isn't an oceanfront house. It used to be on a side street and had a house beside it on the oceanfront. So that's how rapid this thing has evolved down in Buxton, especially over the last 10, 12 years, where we've lost dunes. We've had beach nourishment projects there. There's already been 2. There's a 3rd planned for next year that hopefully will stave this off. But unfortunately for those folks who lost those houses, you know, those 24 houses, many of those were built, the ones that fell today were in the 90s. Some of those, I mean, one of the more recent ones was 1957. So this isn't new construction. These aren't the McMansions of 20-bedroom houses. These are little 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom salt boxes that were built 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. And the beach is just gone now, and there's nothing to protect them from the waves.
Sam Walker, Outer Banks News. You can find his stuff on Twitter, on X, whatever we call it, but also Sam Walker, OBXnews.com. We always appreciate your perspective, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Glad to help out. Yep, of course.